All right, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I, real quick, I'm so sorry, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I want
It's okay.
to ask me to address this before we started. So just for the folks that are on attendance, like the superintendent just mentioned, we will have a public hearing following our discussion, or following our meeting tonight. We have a limit in the number of attendees that we can have present, and that's capped at 500. We are under that capacity right now. We're about 450. But just a heads up that we're also broadcasting live on Facebook, on the Facebook page. We're recording this meeting and we'll post it on YouTube, so it can be accessed afterwards. And I think those were the main things that I was asked to comment on before we moved on. Ms. Thompson, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much. And I think I do have quite a few questions, so I guess I'll pose them. I don't expect answers this evening, so hopefully someone's taking notes on our questions and maybe they can get it back out to us as an FAQ or after the fact, because I don't expect answers this evening. I know we have a long, long night ahead of us, so I think for the board to defer to the public to hear from them would be good too. So I'm just going to ask the questions. If we have a quick answer, great. Otherwise, if someone could just get back to the board. So first, as you did, you recognize those who have been working tirelessly this summer, the 20+ work groups. I just want to give out an additional extra thank you to our custodial staff. They've been working hard all summer as well. And I just want to make sure that, I know that we're all aware of that, as well as our food services department. So it's really been a team effort, and I greatly appreciate all of the hard work that everyone has done this summer. So thank you. It certainly shows in the presentation. So I guess I'll go first to transportation. My questions are these. So the busing, I see we changed all the school start and end times covered. Last, I don't know if it was about 6 months ago, I don't know how long ago, I rode along with a bus driver on their route and saw the amount of kids on and off. And I'm wondering, pick up and drop off, loading and unloading. Kennedy Park, for instance, that was a large stop to pick up students, both at the elementary and middle school, etc. So they congregated, quite a few of them. So I'm concerned about pick up and drop off and loading and unloading. And also how many at any one stop. Obviously we can't allocate X amount, but how are we handling that? Because then now with the bus drivers, concerned about the exposure to them. And I guess the second part to the bus driver is, well, actually, two more questions about bus drivers, and I'll go on to the others. The time to clean the buses in between the runs, and how many are going to be allowed on any one bus. So those are some questions I have so far. The driver subs, we've had a really, really hard time trying to get bus drivers, and I'm not sure what our pool of substitutes for drivers is, but that concerns me greatly as well. So just any of those, do you want to just record and get back to us, or any of those are quick answers, Javier, or anyone?
I can just generally say that we will adhere to the state requirements around bus transportation. The way that those times are actually structured, we envision for every school having double run. So basically bringing half of the students and then picking up the other half of the students. So basically dividing a route into two different routes and, just bringing half as many students. So in those windows that you saw there, you should envision a 15-minute early arrival and then another on-time arrival. So that's the way that we're primarily getting at that. That does not solve for how many students might be getting on at a specific stop. because we obviously, that's where people live. So we would work around it to the extent possible. And again, much of this is education and making sure that people understand that, these are the safety precautions that we have to have in place for us to all stay healthy.
So I guess I'll add to that question too, on the driver sub part. If we've talked about substitutes for teachers, if we could get an explanation of, so if one driver gets it and they go back to the hub, and many more get them, it spreads to them. Transportation is obviously the base for getting our students to and from, and so hoping that transportation department, we have a backup plan for that, or what happens there because there's no transportation, we shut down, or how does that get handled?
Yeah. We don't have answers to all of those.
Okay, I'll keep going.
All of those questions. Obviously, we struggle, as does everybody else, to find bus drivers. We struggle less than others because of some of the steps that we've taken over the past few years. But if we were to have an outbreak that affected a large number of bus drivers, it would be problematic for our viability for running transportation.
Okay. So I have a few other questions. Let's see here. So other surrounding districts, I know you're in contact, superintendent, with them quite frequently, as well as MENAC for the PATHS program. I just was curious as to if there's any conversation that's happening with them and what people are leaning towards, or are they similar plans? I know that you've really done a great job with consulting with them on a regular basis, so I'm just curious as to what surrounding districts are doing.
I don't have the specifics, but we meet tomorrow, and I know, what some are doing, but not what all are doing, so I'll be happy to gather all of that information for the board. Okay.
And again, I'm just going to read these questions off, and then if we could, so I think we saw it this evening from our hearing impaired families and staff, and we now have students that are deaf on the elementary, middle, and high school levels. And so I'm concerned how we're going to address that with the masking requirements, and do we have any kind of special masks provided? They really rely obviously on lip reading, and I think that's something we need to think about. And again,
we do in that list of PPE, there are clear masks for the appropriate staff.
Okay. And what about on the high school level, the functional life skills learners? I didn't see anything about the functional life skills learners. Are they all hybrid as well, along with their peers, or how is that?
Ms. Nally?
Yes. They when I was describing the district program, that would be an example of one of our district programs where we would be offering them, if it's the hybrid AB, they would have access to 4 or 5 days of instruction, but we would do that in a gradual buildup because we want to be practicing all of the health and safety protocols, which are extensive. And so the intent and plan is to provide them with more in-person time. Part of the prioritized group of students we want to give that additional support to. But again, we do it gradually to ensure that we can do it safely.
While we're on that particular subject, on this evening's news, they had in other districts, they were talking to families, and they mentioned the additional money outlay, as I know that it affects all of us. But they were also talking about, in order to meet their IEPs of helping their child, they had to put out more money from their families. And I'm wondering, does the state provide us with extra funds available for to fulfill IEPs? And that's part of the whole money that they're giving us, or?
Not specifically for special ed, but as you know, we did receive a commitment of significant resources from the Department of Ed that will help. So all of the things that we've talked about in terms of facilities improvements, technology, one-to-one technology, professional development, those platforms, and the additional staff and things along those lines, that is largely being being funded with those additional resources. I didn't really touch on this, and I probably should have, and that is, how incredibly fortunate we are, and how incredibly grateful we should be to our state government for stepping up to the plate to do that. It is unusual across the country to have that level of financial support, and many of the things that we're talking about doing, whether it's the supporting the partners in providing daycare, adding transportation routes, substitutes, all of these other things that we're talking about would not be possible without that infusion of state resources. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent. Question, we're getting a lot of emails and concerns from families of grades 10 through 12, and the suggested to be remote. So I guess I have a few questions around the high school level. One is around the PATHS program, and if we are having our high school level students, which is 10 through 12, go to PATHS, are we allowing all of the 20 some odd sending districts to send all their students into PATHS, therefore now again bringing more exposure in, and how are we handling all of the sending districts?
Aaron, do you want to take that? You want me to take it? You're muted. I'll start and then you can jump in. So we are planning to run PATHS as close to sort of high school capacity. So we're running it as a hybrid with 2 days of in-person instruction, 3 days of remote. We are allowing students from the sending districts to come in. One of the reasons that we're able to do that at PATHS, which has 11th and 12th graders, is because those students will be a cohort. I think it's important for people to understand that the cohorting isn't to prevent the spread of the virus. The cohorting is to ensure that if the virus is present, that we can identify as small a group as possible to apply the appropriate contact tracing and whatever measures follow from that, whether it's quarantine or closing and disinfecting and things along those lines. So, PATHS is a great example of the fact that, all of those programs have, a maximum of 20 some kids enrolled. So on any given day, there would only be 10. They would be from multiple districts, including our own. And, if a student were or a staff member were to become infected, then we would be able to contain it to that particular group of students. That's impossible in a setting where, your first period class is U.S. history and you have, a set of students in that class, and then second period, a completely different group of students come in that were in, potentially however many first period classes as there were. So I think it's important for people to understand that the reason that we are able to run PATHS but not able to run a regular high school schedule is our ability to sort of localize and contact trace in the eventuality that somebody were to become sick.
Was Aaron going to add anything? Or is he...
No, I think you have covered it, and just, flagging, that our, 11th and 12th graders in PPS, would be accessing PATHS programming. So.
Okay. And I think this is my last question around high school, and then I have another two categories real quick. So access to the health clinics. We have an open to the public health clinic at Portland High School. And I know that you've been working with Dr. Pat, as well as our health, our nurse coordinator, Tina Veyu. How are we handling access to our public health clinics? I've heard, some scenarios of various people accessing those and in and out of doors, holding doors open and so on, and being able to, I think we talked about entering and exiting from a certain door at the schools. So how are we handling that with the public for the clinics?
I have not. I can get back to you on that.
Okay.
I need to talk to Tina to see where that conversation is with GPH for the other clinics.
Okay, great. And I guess I fib. So the last one on the high school level is, and it seems as though you guys have explored every which way but sideways, and sideways probably too. But I'm wondering, less days, shorter days. If we have less days and we have shorter days, but if we went all remote, would the number of days or length of days change from what you have outlined?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Erin,
So the number of hours in school, so would that change the number of hours? So if we went all remote, we've shortened some of the days here and there, and as well as the number of, I know the state has waived the number of days our students need to be in school for the year. So if we went all remote, Malia's nodding her head, so I just...
Malia, do you want to answer that?
I was understanding it. Do you want to answer, Erin, or I can?
Well, I would say, I think, consistent with the recommendation, I don't know that it would change the number of days. I think, to be up to speed, we've invested in additional technology to be able to deploy, particularly for our pre-K-5 folks, that the number of days, the recommendation would stand. And I think, we, in terms of the number of hours, I guess, we haven't done a specific analysis of that, but I would argue that no, it wouldn't, and based on the experiences that folks had with the remote learning in the spring, and while we were developing much more consistent schedules around that, I think it would be likely comparable to what we will be providing, in the in-person when we're talking about 5 hours of, in-person instructional experience, for pre-K-8, and 6 hours at the high school level. So.
And I would just add 2 quick things that might be helpful for you, Member Thompson, or the public, which is that we would still adhere to that Wednesday day that's for targeted support for students that need it or catch up in revision. And so that would be consistent. And then, as Assistant Superintendent Townsend mentioned, the schedules will be more consistent, and they will include more opportunities for synchronous learning experiences, like the daily morning meeting, let's say at elementary, like a daily opportunity for student discourse. So whereas families might have experienced a real range in terms of how long the fully remote learning took for their child, I think there'll be more of a consistent schedule and arc with more, real instructional interactions during the day and throughout the week as compared to what some students and families might have experienced in the spring.
Thank you. I just noticed in my neighborhood it's all black. All the lights are going on everywhere, so hopefully I stay power for a while. Facility-wise, so some facility questions. One is you mentioned about the windows at the high school being fixed, and there's been discussion around other schools where windows don't open. There was an example given as Riverton, and I just want to know if we're doing checks facility-wise on the opening and closing of windows, and if they don't open, are we addressing that at other schools?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
And so in the case of Riverton is unique because Riverton's windows are designed not to open, but every one of those rooms has a door. So the door would be the way in which we would bring fresh air into those classrooms.
Okay.
But there are other windows in other schools that have been brought to our attention don't open, and those are all getting repaired.
Okay, thank you. And the issue around, I think that we have obviously asbestos contained in our schools where there is underlying asbestos, but you talked about fan circulation. Is there any issues with schools that have asbestos in them? Will fan circulation cause any issues with that?
I don't know for a fact, but I will definitely look into it. I know that has not been brought up as an issue by our facility staff, and so I can get back to you on that.
Okay. My last category here, I guess, is HR. So we always struggle with our sub pool. And that's always been a challenge. And in the middle of a pandemic, I would think it would be even harder. And we're talking about 2 per school. So I'm wondering, what kind of plans we're going to have in place. We couldn't get them when we didn't have COVID. So I'm wondering if you anticipate people signing up to be an issue.
Barb, do you want to tackle that?
So we're working on a proposal. I'll have a proposal this week. The plan is to compensate these permanent subs, if you want to call them that, differently than our daily subs. So we would be enticing people with a different level of compensation and benefits than otherwise a daily sub would get. So that's a plan to attract people. We do have subs. We're going to reach out to our regular sub pool to see who is interested. We'll see what that looks like as well. The other piece of this is we'll be looking at our staff roles to see who we have on staff, for instance, ed techs that hold bachelor's degrees and also hold teacher certification. So we'll take a broader look across all staff to see who else may be able to step up and is interested in stepping up into some roles.
Okay, thank you. I would think the incentive in person versus online would be. Okay, and then extra teachers, so around staffing. If we grant the accommodations that were discussed and the requests, where do we get the staff to backfill? Because it sounds as though if we have extra teachers available and some are teaching remote and those aren't their students, and they're teaching someone else's students because the parents have opted out for their child not to come. I'm curious about the whole staffing, how that's going to happen if we do grant all of those accommodations that you've outlined this evening. Just curious. The staffing sounds a little short, but I'm sure you guys have it all figured out.
Well, we don't have it figured out. It's very complex.
You've thought of everything, so.
So from one perspective, people who may end up in a situation where the accommodation can't be granted and they choose to leave, right? So in that situation, we have people who do take, a year of leave. Those are unpaid. So we would backfill with a 1-year only position. It's hard to predict because each of these are so individualized where we're going to land. But yes, we will need additional staff to cover some of these positions.
And Javier, do you anticipate on that staffing any layoffs as a result of any of the hybrid or not in attendance models? Particularly, I'm thinking about the food service workers on the high school level, where we're only going to have 9th graders there, and we have staffing there. Is there a plan to transition them to central kitchen, and are we going to be able to keep all employed and not have layoffs? You're muted.
At this point, we're not looking at any layoffs, so no, at this point, we're hoping to keep everybody employed.
Okay.
I would add at the high school level, the plan is, that given the timing of the day, that just because it's just 9th graders there, that there would be the kind of bagged lunch, grab and go options. So, there's, still significant need for staffing to support that at the high schools.
Okay. I think, and probably lastly, we don't have any student opt-out numbers yet or numbers indicated, Superintendent, is that correct?
No, we do. We went through that in the survey. 11% approximately opted for remote learning, and then about 4% said that they were going to withdraw. Those are not confirmed, obviously, but that's just what we got from that survey.
From that survey, what the May one, or the
No,
recent,
the
most
one
recent
that
one?
closed on Sunday.
Okay. And is there any possible way to send out another? I'm not trying to make more work because you guys already have enough. But any other surveys do you anticipate going out to families or to staff after this wrap up this evening?
We don't have one scheduled right now.
Okay. All right.
The
Thank you.
only caveat is we are doing, following up on the family one, we are doing a specific multilingual one to ensure that we are getting the student opt-out in home languages. So it's a version of the one that went out last week, but will be by phone so that it can be in the appropriate home languages. So that's the only caveat. So those may, add to those numbers depending on the response.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the and taking in the questions.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Would it be okay if I follow up? Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a follow up to one of her questions? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead and then.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that question about the survey. My understanding is that about a third of families responded to the survey, and that we assumed that the 2/3 that did not respond were all going to opt for in person. So that 11% was really a third of the respondents.
That's
that
correct. That's
I
correct.
just wanted to make sure.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Aaron, you have something you want to talk about?
I'll look at the data and confirm. My understanding was that 11% is actually 11% of the student total population. So that's inclusive of the non-respondents. So the number of the percentage of students who responded, right, was higher, but the 11% represents of the total student population, approximately 11%.
Great. Thank you for that. Let's go to Ms. Bondo.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. So, like Mr. Thompson said, you don't have to respond to all of them. Maybe just follow up later on if you don't have any answer. Thank you so much for everything you have done and the team. So my first question is on the facility improvement. When I try to understand the time frame, then we have for the facility improvement, when I see we have to do the plexiglass, ventilation, and repair windows, and I see the opening, then we're projecting on September 14, and also we have some outdoors space that we want to create. Are we already estimate the time frame between now until the September 14 if we'll be ready for those improvements?
We will be very close on the windows. We will probably not be, we'll probably not have the ionizers and the ducts fully implemented. We will have the UV where we can have it. So we already have procured it and have it scheduled to be installed in nurse's office and so on. And, there is obviously, there are a lot of people purchasing different things now. And it's, so I can't, that's why, in the slide it says that we may not be ready with the ionizer by the start of the school year. But all of the air purifiers and fans and things along those lines, those have all been procured. The windows, I understand, I know that we just signed the contract, but they're already being, built and scheduled. It will be close, but we expect to be ready with the window repairs.
Do we have the cost of all the improvements so far?
I'm sorry, I did not hear you.
Okay. Do we have the cost? How much everything will cost to do those improvements for all the schools so far?
I don't have that. We can get you the information that we have so far.
Oh, okay.
But I don't have that off the top of my head.
All right. So my second question is around teachers. When I see the survey for the returning teachers in May was 60%, and the one under right now is 28%. So do we?
We can't hear you, Ms.
Now, do we have an idea how many teachers?
Mickey.
28. Okay. Can you hear me now? Maybe let me turn my video off. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe much better, right? So I learned from last time. So thank you, Chair. So yeah, for the teachers in May, I saw the survey, 60 say yes, and actually it's 28 that I saw. Do we know exactly how many teachers are willing to come back? And some, the one who really want to stay remotely.
I'm not sure I know. I'm not sure I understand the question exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Try it again.
Yeah, I try to understand now the 28 who say yes for the return versus the 60 who say yes in May. Do we know how many of those teachers, on those 28, how many teachers are willing to come back in person, and how many say yes to the remotely or staying remotely?
Well, this is the question was specifically, would you return to school on site?
Yes.
If public health officials indicated that it would be safe.
Yeah.
And so that is specifically the question, would they come, to school? And 28% said yes. That doesn't mean that only 28% of our teachers are coming back necessarily. There could be people that don't want to come back, but would come back because, they would do it out of responsibility and, but that's the number that have said that they would return to school on site if public health officials indicated that it would be safe to do so.
Okay. My third one is on the newcomer, the IELD. We say we're going to prioritize because of the language. It's really important right now. And those 4 days, I try to understand, because if I do remember, if I get my notes right, we had about 440 newcomers from level 1 to 4. So how many of those students do we have right now currently enrolled to the new program from 1 to 4? And if we do parents have also the choice to keep those children remotely at home?
I can answer, and then Javier, you can build on that. But I think your first question was around how many students, and so I believe we have 450 students at the elementary level and 200 at the secondary level who are qualify as IELD at this point. And then your second question was around, I think, whether or not this would be optional. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, and it would be. This is about, just like with any of these scenarios, it's, families can choose to be remote if that's what they're comfortable with, and or if that's what is appropriate for their family situation, their child. So this is just offering this additional support in the case that families feel comfortable and like it would help them.
Okay. So I just want to make clear, understandable, if the parents have a choice, all the document and application or form should be translated to them, or they need to fill a form to try to, so that's going to be for the general population. All the parents who have a choice to keep their kids at home, do they have to fill a form to let the district know, okay, my child will stay remotely at home?
Grace, can you answer that?
So I can also chime in here. Just that that first survey, there isn't a specific form. That first survey went out. It's given us student level data that schools are following up for confirmation on. As I mentioned, we're doing the follow up survey and phone survey in home languages. Lingual families that'll again give us student level data in which we'll follow up and confirm. So there isn't a specific additional form. It's through that survey that we're collecting that data, and then at the site level we'll do follow up confirmations to ensure that we have the correct pool of students who are opting into the fully remote option.
Okay. And also for the multilingual office, try to understand, because we have parent specialists who are working with different school buildings. So how that scenario is going to look like during the reopening? Did you already see the vision? Are those parent specialists going to move building to building, helping some of those students?
I did not follow that.
Oh my goodness. The multilingual office. We have a parent specialist who used to move school to schools to help parents and those newcomers. So how that scenario is going to look like for those multilingual, because they have to move building to building. Are they going to keep doing the same way they have done, or we have different options for them to help families?
At this time, we have been doing remote. In other words, what we have been doing is to assist families either over the phone or via Zoom. So that's how we have been helping families respond.
Okay. So for my fourth one, I was getting almost at the end. For the high school, right, I think the high school have to use the metro if they need to go, if they choose to go back to school for the learning, for the center learning space after those 3 hours, after the remotely. So are we have any safety protocol with the metro, having our student using the metro bus?
Aaron, can you take that?
I believe the metro, in my understanding, has, and I think there was a conversation in this recently, but, has been implementing, various safety protocols, that would apply, for our students in terms of, accessing and utilizing that transportation. So they have had some enhanced cleaning protocols and things like that they've been implementing, but I think that's, my understanding. I don't know, Javier.
And we are meeting with Metro later this week.
Right.
Oh, okay. Okay. So when I look at the hybrid version, then we have students are coming from the A, B. I mean, A Monday to Tuesday, Monday and Thursday, and B Tuesday and Friday for 5 hours. Do we have for the custodian? I mean, for the cleaning and to disinfect all the rooms now? I mean, it's not going to be the same way the custodian used to clean the building. So
We lost her.
Ms. Bondo, we lost you, your audio. She's still logged in, so let's just wait a moment and see if she comes back up. In the meantime, let's move on to Ms. Figdor, and then, like I said, if Miki comes back on, maybe we can let her continue. Ms. Figdor, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, she's back.
Miki?
Yes?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. If you still had a question, you were breaking up and we couldn't hear you, but if you still had more to go, go ahead.
Yes. I have 2 more to go, Chair, please.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah.
We can hear you better now.
Oh, good. So I was asking about the cleaning, about the custodian, because now everything's going to be more deeper. With the hybrid, then we have about 5 hours that the student has to spend in the school, and what time the custodian they will have time to clean. It's going to be all afternoon and overnight, because the cleaning and to disinfect is going to take a little long time. Do we have enough custodians to do that? And if they do so, do we have some extra compensation for those custodians who's going to take all those risks to do those safety and cleaning?
I missed the last part. We will have additional time for cleaning as a result of the fact that we have a shorter day. We also are looking at changing our schedules to have more custodians on a day schedule to be able to assist with cleaning while the students are in school. Right now, or prior to COVID, most of our custodians were on evening shifts, so that we had like 1 or 2 people during the day, and then the rest of the folks were working after the students left. And we are looking to change that now, so depending on which way we go, we would, under this recommendation, we would move more people to day schedules so that they would be able to keep up with cleaning in the buildings. The fact that we do have a shorter day assists with the ability for custodians to, have more time to do the cleaning. We have new equipment that is designed to do the deep cleaning that's necessary, which we now have across the school district. And so, we are confident that we'll be able to meet our cleaning requirements. We do have a number of vacant custodian positions. That is an ongoing challenge for us. And so, we hope to be able to fill them. Obviously, there are more people looking for jobs now than there were, prior to the pandemic. So hopefully we'll be able to fill some of those vacant positions.
All right, 2 more to go. For the social emotion learning, and I think I heard Malia when you mentioned about the time for relationship. So how the social emotion learning will be happening for the high school students, because they will stay mostly remotely at home. So what kind of support we have in place or thinking about helping those students from high school?
I'll jump in actually and add 2 things. One, social emotional learning, should be happening throughout each and all of our courses. So it's not just something that happens in just one space and time during the day, but should be part of the overall nature of relationships and how we develop them. But specifically advisory, or what is broadly often referred to as advisory structures, again, at the high school level, Deering coaching, Bulldog Block, and Crew is generally how we refer to them. Each of the 3 schools are increasing the number of opportunities per week for those structures. Certainly Cascade has had a long tradition of that, has been part of the pillar of what's helped them in that transition, and both Deering and Portland are expanding the number of times per week that students will engage in those structures. And that will be a combination of both in-person and remote opportunities. So multiple times per week for all students to engage in the advisory structure, Bulldog Block, during coaching, whatever, however it's referred to at a given school. So yes, it'll be available for all students and is a central part of maintaining connection for students, as we transition back into the school year and potentially have to transition through scenarios.
Okay, thank you. My last question is around our staff who we have our teachers. Most of them, they are covered by the PEA. So I think that's for Barbara. So what's the compensation? Maybe I didn't get exactly when you explained about some of our staff who are not who have no representation, who are not covered with PAE. What kind of, or like technicians, the no rep, the base. What kind of compensation we have for those employers?
So to clarify, are you asking for the actual numbers or for the numbers of requests that have been submitted?
Yeah, for the number of requests and what kind of compensation we have for them, yes.
So I can tell you what the numbers of requests for accommodations overall. As I said, that of the requests we received, about 3/4 are from teachers, 73%. And ed techs are 14%. So we've had 25 requests from ed techs.
Okay.
And 8 from base unit. And 13 from non-represented.
So they all qualify with the paid and unpaid leaves if they have yeah, they're all having the same options as a compensation in case something happened to them?
For sick leave, yes. Everybody will have access to those 20 days of sick leave.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair. I'm done with my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Londo. Let's go to Ms. Figdor.
Thank you so much, Chair. I wanted to start by just acknowledging the enormous responsibility that's on our local and state leadership in the absence of any national plan or strategy for responding to the pandemic. And also the communities, also acknowledging the community's commitment and sacrifice we've made to be in a place where we can conceive of a hybrid plan like the one before us tonight. It's taken, as the superintendent alluded to at the beginning of the meeting, a team effort. I would say it's taken extraordinary leadership by the superintendent and his team, as well as our state leaders, and then the full community. So just wanted to start by acknowledging that we're actually a community that's in a place that we can have this conversation, and that's an extraordinary achievement given what's happening in the rest of the country. So I want to thank everyone, every single person who is listening or participating tonight, and our full community. My first question is back on the facility improvements, and it's a follow-up to an earlier question. But I guess I wasn't clear if we expect the facility improvements to be complete by the new new date for the start of school for students on September 14th, or that's we're not sure. We're not sure yet. I think it would be very helpful to continue to solidify that timing and ensure that we can, we do everything we can to have those facility improvements done before we're really having people in the buildings in a significant way. My next question is with respect to outdoor learning. And over the last weeks, I've been, really enthusiastic to learn about the partnership that we've had with the community to enable us to have 2 outdoor classrooms at each school. And I'm wondering if, what it would take, if there's a possibility. I realize there's huge logistical issues, but given what we're facing, in terms of, working so hard to minimize risks, and we know that the risks outdoor are so much less than indoors, is there more we could do? Could we scale up outdoor learning?
Malia or Erin, do you want to take that?
I can start, and then Erin, you can add on. I think that just in terms of the space, we're saying that we're having at least 2 outdoor classrooms per building. So I do think, to the extent that it's possible to have more than 2 at a given site, that would be on the table for exploration and consideration. And then I think I would also just say that that's another pretty significant thing to just figure out logistically in terms of how we would manage that, the extent to which there would be universal sort of ease and acceptance from all teachers to want to move a lot of instruction outside. So there's just a whole host of variables. And so there's, it's something where we're just trying to figure out how do we move toward this with an idea actually that we might scale more of this up over time. That, this is a key strategy in response to the current situation with the pandemic, but there's interest in opportunities for outdoor learning beyond just that too, not just as a reaction, if that makes sense. And so I think we just want to be super thoughtful and strategic about our implementation plan so that we can do it effectively and successfully. But I guess the bottom line though is that to the extent there is opportunity to have more than just the 2 classrooms where we have more space and we have teachers who are able and willing and we can pull that off, successfully, given all the other things we're trying to implement and get folks trained in and prepared for and ready to do, we were certainly open to that. So that's a work in progress. We're just trying to talk about at least our kind of baseline expectation across schools.
And I'll just add, want to shout out the Portland Society of Architects and their executive director, Addie Smith-Raymond, who's helped to marshal the community in that regard to provide support. So, that's looked like each school being paired with an architect or landscape architect. They've done, by the end of this week, everybody's done walkthroughs to identify potential spaces. And that includes like up to 14 possible spaces at some campuses, right? And we're asking them to do some prioritization, but not to take any off the list, right? In terms of the notion of scale up, because some of these may just require, a few logs, right, rolled out where you could have a group of kids to, a space to sit down, right? Or a tarp, strung up between two trees to create a little shade, in addition to a few hay bales. So, the focus has not been on, major facilities, like structures or interventions, right? But, as they've referred to them, kind of quick and dirty interventions. So, but it does remain, so we're gathering the list of what it would take in terms of both resources and, materials and labor, to be able to execute on that so that we can then identify what we're able to support and provide, what would need to be provided and coordinated from community contributions and resources. Again, just from your initial question, our facilities team has been flat out since day one, right, trying to make all these modifications. So, I think the question of scaling up just is a question of bandwidth, both on the facility side and on the teacher side. I mean, what we're asking of teachers to learn about remote learning, right, to learn about outdoor learning. There's in amidst just everybody's individual experience of the pandemic. So we recognize, outdoor spaces as just hugely valuable in terms of safety. Certainly Maine's a place with an outdoor ethic that we can leverage. We feel like we are moving at a pace that, that we can, and certainly have interest in continuing to grow that over time.
Thank you. I appreciate all of that and understand all of the challenges, but continue to think that we should go big to the extent that it's possible, because the risks are just so much lower. There's lots of other benefits of remote learning. I'm not speaking to those. I'm speaking to the risk around COVID. And so, in my mind, to the extent that we can make that opportunity, I know the immense challenges we're facing just with everything else. And I'm very pleased to hear how much progress we have made. My next question is very specific, but it's about how we're deciding the AP cohorts. And I'm wondering if we've considered doing it by geography rather than last names, since some families have kids with last names. With different last names, like my own, for instance, in an effort to keep families on the same schedule.
So keeping families on the same schedule is definitely kind of our will be a driving priority in creating those groupings. And recognize that a generic alpha split doesn't necessarily accomplish that. So we are mindful of households, right? And being able to group students by households. But I would say the driving priority is being able to keep households on the same AB schedule that will, in terms of informing how we'll create the AB groupings.
Thank you. And we've touched on this issue a little bit, but I guess I'm wondering from Barb and any others if the expectation around finding long-term subs is different, in part because we're in a very different labor market than we've been in when we had such challenges finding subs. So I hear you that you're considering a different position with different benefits and all of that, different salary and benefits. But do you also just see have you seen a shift in the labor market that makes you optimistic about the potential for us to fill those positions?
So there's certainly been an uptick in the size of our hiring pools this year, so that does give me some confidence. But obviously demographics is going to play a big piece of this, and who is willing to come on site and who won't. there's potential that there are students who graduated last year who still haven't found work or who have recently been laid off, so that, there's an opportunity there. So yes, I'm hopeful, but I think it's going to take a whole bunch of different things to make this all work.
Thank you. And then with regard to the plan for the hybrid model for high schools for grades 10 to 12, I'm wondering if we've considered continuing with a block schedule like we have for ninth grade in order to allow some cohorting.
So the block schedule and the cohorting, I would say, are actually two different issues. The block schedule is just the number of courses and time. And in fact, some of the schools, specifically Portland, is making some shifts to try and have a more, kind of consistent schedule. That's what they've been pursuing around this in terms of a different block. But just because you have a block schedule doesn't necessarily mean that you're cohorted in the same way. And so I think, they've had to do some reconfiguration at the ninth grade to ensure that. And the, specifically Portland and Deering, but even true for Casco, particularly at the 11th, 12th grade, just the variety of different courses that kids are taking at that point, at that level, it is just a huge transition and would really result in the reduction of number of options that kids would have if we were to be able to try and do that. So it was a shift that felt like was out of out of range in terms of our capacity to implement and in terms of what students had signed up for and courses they were expecting and kind of on their trajectory towards graduation. So so I think we definitely talked about that, but, that's, I would name those as different issues, just how we organize the time and then what are the courses kids are taking within that are kind of separate issues.
And did we consider cohorting for core classes only as a way to deal with the many different classes that students are taking at the high school level?
Again, at the comprehensive high school level, you have, even for a core course, you have a number of different levels around that, right? And that your level of the course you might be taking in ELA may not be the same as it is for math, right? And you may be taking a different science than another student because of the kind of course trajectory and course selection you'd had that led up to it. So the variables and all those various permutations play out in, kind of literally thousands of ways that dialing that back would require a complete reinvention of what the course catalog is and a real abrupt departure for what what students' experience has been at Portland and Deering, and part of the reasons they may have chosen to go to Portland and Deering and attend a comprehensive high school. And I want to acknowledge in this, that compared to some, we know that some of our surrounding districts are choosing, the model I've seen most frequently is that they're doing some level of synchronous. So, kids are, kind of just following their schedule, and they have some kids that are in person and then some kids that are participating remotely. And we had discussions about that as well. And just from a pedagogical perspective and student learning experience, felt like that was really challenging both for the kids to experience and really demanded a kind of specific kind of teaching and learning that doesn't align with our teaching and learning beliefs, and that we were going to be able to create better learning experiences by committing to kind of the remote model and then trying to toggle between the two and having some kids in the classroom in front of you and a handful of kids on the remote platform, and how a teacher would be able to effectively engage all of those kids in those multiple formats. Not to mention what the student experience on that side is, which is they're just sitting at home in front of their computer for 6 hours a day. So we recognize, but we believe kind of the best instructional experience, has, for those given the challenges we've named, was leading with the remote option, providing the learning center supports for students to get access either in person or virtually to support them. And that was a construct that we only did a little bit of in the spring, and that we're kind of doubling down on to create greater access for our 10th through 12th graders. So it's A, it's not so isolating, and B, they get the kind of support they need to be successful.
Great. I have one last question, just cognizant of all the people waiting. So what is our expectation for how for the timeline that different staff would start to come back to site?
Ask the question again to make sure that I understand it. Like the teaching staff or other staff?
Teaching staff.
Teaching staff. So teaching staff is scheduled to come back to the buildings. I believe the first day is the 24th. And so we are expecting, staff to come back for the 24th and, probably not before then. One of the reasons that we're asking for the delayed start is to give more time for all of the aspects of preparing for the school year, so all of the professional development and practice with the new protocols, setting up classrooms and class lists and all of those other things that go with that. So I think but the goal would be for people to return by the 24th.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move over to Mr. Balkan.
Looking at the Group A, Group B schedule, what's the rationale for the ABXAB schedule versus, say, for example, an AAXBB?
Erin and Malia, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I can start. I think that we had actually looked at the AAXBB previously, partly because we thought we needed to do the deep clean in between the cohorts Wednesday, and now are feeling more confident that we have plans in place to be able to do sufficient deep cleaning in between the cohorts. So then we started to think about it more from a pedagogical perspective. There was a rationale held by some in the work groups that the AABB could be beneficial because you get a little bit of momentum over 2 days. I think the downside of that is that then students are, away from that instruction for 5 days. You've got your 3 days of remote plus your weekend potentially. And so, those are some of the things we grappled with in the learning groups about, okay, well, what are the pros and cons of that pedagogical experience? I think where we landed was feeling like this would enable students to launch new learning and then be sent off with the learning, with the physical materials, so that they could then, work on that, get some feedback at the end of the day, and then come back, to go deeper with that. And it would just enable more of a seamless kind of pedagogical experience for the students. And teachers could be then looking at, the work to help inform what next moves they would make. Also, it helps support, especially at the elementary level, one of our objectives to try not to have kids on screens all the time, because we can send them off with, certain packets and assignments and units and things like that, that they work on, and felt like if they're kind of for extended periods of time remote, potentially more of a reliance on more time on technology in that context. So definitely something that was debated, I would say, among the teams that were working on it, but ultimately landed there because we thought that would enable more of a seamless learning experience for students. Anything you would add to that, Erin? But okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Balkan. Let's go to Ms. Morioni.
Thank you, Chair. First, I want to start as my fellow colleagues began. Thank you so very, very much to the superintendent, staff, all the hardworking members of the working groups. It's certainly unprecedented times, and it's also been summer, which is even harder to ask of people to take of their time. We have very little amount of days in our Maine summers to begin with. But I just want to recognize the fact that all that has been discussed tonight, there's, as we know, is no guarantee that any of it's going to be 100% safe. And so when I have been asked and been thinking about this, I guess I keep in my mind trying to figure out if I needed to find the best answer for something. Let's take, for example, I use the analogy of our budget. It's time for us to discuss the budget and who would I depend on the most to relay that information and discuss that information. It would be our finance director, working with our finance committee. And because this is a medical crisis, this is a pandemic of the nation and the world, I'm very reluctant, to be perfectly honest, as a board member, as one of 9, and without zero medical education, to be honestly making any of these decisions for our students and staff. I'm going to go ahead and admit that right now, that I am trying to understand where the superintendent and staff, where they're coming from with piecing this together, and I'm trying to remain hopeful that relying on the Maine CDC and DOE is our best option. And as Ms. Figdor said, since we have no other real national leadership happening with the best recommendation, and we're all in this uncertainty of what would be the best scenario, really, I would much rather rely on medical information, medical expertise in this. So when you were talking, so I'm getting to my question, I promise, and that is to the superintendent, how much have we relied on our nurse Tina, Dr. Pat, and medical staff, which from what I've heard so far, there's only been 2 names mentioned. How much have we relied on Portland medical expertise? Because I know the board members have gotten emails from physicians that are also parents of students in our schools, offering suggestions, asking questions, even offering to be of assistance. And just curious, can you give me a better understanding of how much we're relying on medical expertise in Portland?
So we're relying heavily on the expertise of our head nurse and our medical officer, Dr. Patterson. So they have been integrally involved in developing all of our protocols. I do think, that as you accurately stated, we are relying on the medical advice. Everything that we've done has been shaped around what CDC and the medical specialists have said is safe or isn't safe. So everything from the idea of, layering to the concepts of public health. And, those are all ideas that have come out of the conversations with medical providers. We've had occasional communication from members of the community who are also members of the medical community, and you've seen some of those, that we've followed up. So, specifically, we had somebody who reached out talking about having a suggestion for a broader testing protocol. We are all in if we can manage to do that. So I know that Tina and Dr. Pat were following up with that person to figure out if it's a viable option for us. We've been in very close contact with, again, medical experts at Greater Portland Health, and they have helped us to shape what is, our testing protocol. As limited as it may be, it's significantly more than what we would have had without those partnerships and those relationships. So we will continue to do that in the same way that we did that with our outdoor learning work that Aaron and Malia described earlier. And we are in the same. When it comes to the facilities work, we've had some great feedback and ideas from members of the community that have sent us, articles that they've written or that they've read about, how to cleanse the air and things along those lines. So I think that those are the relationships that we rely on, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you.
Just for the sake of, clarity and to help people understand. Do you mind just letting people know who Dr. Patterson is and who Tina Value is?
Yeah. Tina Value is our head nurse. She is, in addition to being the nurse at Reiki, is also district level overseer of our nurse activity. Tina has been with the district for a substantial period of time, is very well respected, and has been just working tirelessly to help us to do everything that we need to do. Dr. Pat Patterson is the assistant director of pediatrics at the Barbara Bush Hospital here in Maine, and she has also been the district's designated chief medical officer for a long time. Again, predates me. I don't know exactly how much longer than that, but very well respected in the field and knowledgeable about the work that we do as a school district. I think you all know that Portland is but we've done some really innovative things with clinics and, contraception and, opioid treatments and things along those lines. So I think that has all happened under the tutelage of Tina and Dr. Pat.
I would just quickly add, I don't think you mentioned this, Javier, and if you did, I apologize, but also I think it's helpful to know that Tina serves on the State Board of Nurses, and they meet at least weekly, so she's tapped into that larger network as well.
Thanks.
No, thank you for that explanation, and I would also encourage us for those physicians and nurses in the community that have offered to support and lend a hand to even consider developing a larger cohort of medical experts that we can rely on, because my next question is going to be the what if question of what would constitute us to go all virtual in your mind, Superintendent?
A red designation from the state?
So waiting for the state.
Yeah, you asked the question. That's what I would use.
Okay. And then when it's time to make that decision, it would not be a board vote to make the decision. Is that correct?
To move directly into red between semester breaks would be just based automatically on having a red designation from the state.
I guess what my question is going with this is I'm still, to be perfectly honest, still unsure as to why the board is voting on this. And the reason why I say that is simply because this is unprecedented medical concern, medical issue, and I'm relying on of all the hard work of the working groups and you, Superintendent. And so I just wanted to put that out there that because it's such an important medical issue and concern, and also seeing the survey results from our teachers, if this was a curriculum decision, I can understand, okay, the board then looks at, okay, we have a very large percentage of teachers that don't want that curriculum change. We would decide to postpone that change. We would decide to opt out of it, maybe even take a longer term view of instating it. I'm concerned now that, again, our teachers' reaction, I'll get to my question. My next question, it revolves around when you mentioned around the state, yes, recommended the families to be self-reporting of their son or daughter before coming to school about fever or any other type of types of symptoms. I know that, again, the state's recommending that, but if you dig deep into medical recommendations, it actually does show that it's best to check for temperatures before going into a building or a hospital. You can't even enter any of our hospitals without getting your temperature checked by a scanner. There are thermal scanners you just walk in front of. You don't even need an actual person to take a person's temperature. So I just want to go back to your point around bandwidth, around taking our students' temperatures going into our schools, and just ask more, a little bit more, dig deeper about that, and why do we not have the bandwidth, and or looking at other, because the technology is there and it's not that expensive for thermal.
It's because the medical advice that we've received is that is of minimal value, and so that's the primary reason. So again, to your point about following the medical advice, that's the medical advice that we've received.
And then my final question is with regards to, I know Ms. Bondo asked about it, and others, board members too, around the sanitation. And so you did say you're feeling pretty confident that we'll have enough janitorial staff to do the cleaning necessary in the schools?
I said that we have several vacancies that we are hoping to fill. If we cannot fill them, then we will do what we've done for the past 3 years, which is to have overtime for staff to be able to complete those cleaning protocols. We've added equipment that makes the cleaning easier and better, and we are planning to change our schedules to enable what is, a priority now, which is the contact cleaning while students are in the buildings. So, I believe that we are, we have the resources to ensure that we meet our requirements in terms of cleaning, and we'll continue to try to get the additional resources so that we don't have to rely on overtime. And again, there's no question that if we have a outbreak and we have a number of custodial staff that are sick, that it would challenge us and push us in a different direction than the direction that we're going right now. And the same is true when somebody asks a question about, bus drivers. The same is true, about teachers. The same is true about, our internal capacity as a administration to be able to manage the day-to-day needs if, there was an outbreak in HR or in our business office or anywhere else in the district.
Are we getting cleaning protocols also from the state?
I'm sorry, I missed this.
Are we getting the cleaning protocols? Those come from the state?
The cleaning protocols do not come from the state. I mean, there's general guidance around things like frequent contact cleaning and things along those lines. There are national standards. I can't remember what the organization is. If Steve were here, he would be able to tell you what it is. And we do adhere to those standards, meet and exceed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Morioni.
Let's go to Mr. Burke.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Like Member Thompson, I will offer questions, and I don't expect responses this evening. I'll cede to the Chair and Superintendent's discretion on what will help advance our conversation tonight, but I don't mean to absorb time unnecessarily here. I want to say so much work and so much care, and I want to say thank you to everybody that's been involved. That 4 slides of people that have been carrying this. This is heavy work that I know keeps everybody on this call up at night, including the parents and community members that are here with us tonight. Thank you to everyone for carrying this burden, doing everything you can to mitigate risks in your planning of COVID-19 transmission, of access to food, of social emotional needs of everybody, and of course, our learning as well. From tonight, I'm better informed about the context within which we are discussing this in Portland and Cumberland County, as well as the details of the plan itself. So thank you. That said, there is also a basic biology, the virus, that hasn't changed, and that will continue into 2021 at least. I didn't participate in the preliminary design teamwork in May and June, and it's encouraging to see so many items that came forth during that time that were good changes, even without the context of COVID-19, like the Portland Promise point person. So just want to say I'm encouraged by that for our district, period. I'm also grateful to see that the concerns that we heard and the learning that came from Spring's remote learning stuck. Those weren't lost, including minimizing time that elementary school students are in need of a digital device for learning on remote days. Again, I'm encouraged by that. So here's my questions. First off, I want to reinforce the idea that we do another district-wide poll now that there's more detailed plans that have been released, in addition to the fact that I know most, if not all, families that I spoke with struggled with the design and wording of that survey. I think we can do better than that. I think we can get better data from it. I'm curious, how have the racial disparities of COVID-19 infection rates been considered in our opening plans? And you can stop me if you'd like to respond. Otherwise, I'll continue on with questions. I just heard that if we get a red designation from the state, we would go full remote, but I was not clear if that would be delayed until the change of a semester or would happen immediately. Happen immediately. Okay, thank you. Just phew. Okay. I think, as was also raised, I'm curious why, or was starting with full remote and then phasing in from there considered, rather than hybrid and phasing in from there? And if it was considered and ruled out, why was it ruled out?
I think it's worth trying to answer that, because obviously that was an option that was available to us. I think, fundamentally, the science as dictated by the CDC's color coding for the region does not warrant keeping students out of school. And I think from the very beginning, our commitment has been to try to follow the science. As we, in the last couple of weeks, there have been two major positions or studies put out by organizations that have looked at all sides of this issue and have come out very strongly on the importance and the value of getting children into school and into in-person learning. So from that perspective, whether it was the National Academy of the Sciences report that was published in late July, or the American Academy of Pediatrics position statement on reopening of schools, those have been the guiding the guiding light to the decision to move forward with what is, frankly, for many considered to be I think I got an email yesterday saying, timid, measured approach to opening with, a number of intervening steps before we ever get to full all students in school. So we did not consider remote as the initial option because we believe that if we have the opportunity to bring students into school, and the data says that we can do that safely, and we can get our other conditions in place, then I think we should make an effort to do that, and that's why we proposed what we proposed.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank Member Figdor for raising the importance of being outside, and I thank you for the work that's happened thus far to encourage that planning. As you know, from my time on the design team, I was very vocal about that being an important health and safety strategy, in addition to its other benefits. And from what I've seen, the science says that it's somewhere around 20 times less risky in terms of transmission to be outside than to be inside. So I'll continue to track and encourage us to do everything we can to be outside first. I'm curious what a mask break looks like to the planning team currently. It was a new term for me, not familiar with it. I think since that's related to elementary students, I'll also ask the question, do all our elementary students fit in our buildings with social distancing protocols in place for that 5-day-a-week, everybody in plan?
We expect that they will. We will work through specific situations where that doesn't work. But, currently the 3-foot social distancing that is stipulated is one that we should largely be able to meet. If in addition to that, we are losing 10% of our students from being in school day in and day out as a result of opting for remote or withdrawing from school, then I'm fairly confident that we will be able to do that. And in those instances where we can't, we'll make the kinds of adjustments that would be necessary for that.
Would it be realistic to have more detailed audit of that situation and plan for our next meeting before our vote, or is that
I don't think that it's realistic for us to have that for the next meeting. I think it's realistic for us to have that by the time that we open school, because we will have to make lists and we will have additional information about who is actually opting in and opting out. And, but in general, we can tell you where we can't meet the 3 feet social distancing. Aaron, we could tell that today, right? Not at this moment. But
yeah. I mean, what is known and what the contingency plan would be appreciated for in advance of next meeting. Thanks. Just reiterating the family, how to sort students into those cohorts. Just flag that was also a concern for me. I know that a lot of thought's gone into that, and I'm sure you'll come out with a solve to ensure siblings are kept together. All right, so this is one that's been weighing on me. As more details have come about that those that are choosing a full remote scenario, including if they need to for the medical concerns of their family, there's a loss of relationships and community as they would be put as part of this all district cohort. I think many of those students that would select that will also be students that have IEPs, and there's a lot that goes into building those plans and supporting those students and building a sense of trust that needs are being met and that sort of thing. So that's a concern of mine. There's also a sense of othering and alienation from the school communities that families and students have worked hard to be part of. That's a result of that plan. And I say that compassionately to where the origination of such a plan for how to meet the needs of families that choose to be remote only as well. But I need to raise that up, that I'm hearing that and I'm feeling that from our families.
Can you say more about that? Because I'm not sure if there's a question there or there's a guidance or a concern. I don't understand the concern if that's what you're...
Okay, so a family that needs to elect to be remote is now been told that they will be part of a full district cohort. They will not have a relationship with the school that they have previously been associated with, or teachers that they or support staff necessarily that they've previously been involved with. So there's a loss of identity in terms of their affiliation with the school, a loss of relationship with classmates, with teachers, all that. And there's a sense of othering that comes from that too, that they can't be part of that community because they need to make this choice for their own family's health and safety. So there's a cascading effect happening there. So yes, I guess my guidance is, can you think further about that and how to address that to support families, and are there alternatives? Yes.
I mean, I would just say one thing, and then I hear that you're just taking that as like a pro, as we get into the details of operationalizing this. I'll just say that, to the extent that the puzzle pieces fit together, I think it would be a first priority to keep students connected to educators that are in their home school. I think the challenge will be if it's the case that, we have one kindergarten teacher or something across the elementaries who's going remote, and then most of the teachers are fifth, and it's really just acknowledging that there's a little bit of an economies of scale issue there that we're trying to be thoughtful about, because we are mindful of how much we're asking the classroom teachers to manage by having students in person and remote. It gets really hard to picture asking that classroom teacher to have a third version of a cohort of students that they're doing something different for. I just think there's a point at which that's an unreasonable expectation given, the time they have. Now, that being said, again, I definitely think that the understanding about the connection to school community there's an awareness there. So I think it's not to say that, if you're a Rowe student, you have no connection to the school and you have these teachers you've never met and there's nothing that happens there. I think we still have to get the data put together in order to figure out how do we actually make that work. But I guess what I would just want you to understand is that's what we're grappling with. And to the extent that it works out, where we can match kids up with educators that are connected to their school community and to people they know, we would of course prioritize making that happen.
And I do want to
push further on that as well.
And I do want to add that, and I think Malia covered this when she talked about the consistencies, that, a big part of what we will do with our remote learning is to have a much stronger focus on relationships and, direct connection with teachers so that, hopefully we are also building a community of those students. So it won't be a community with their neighborhood school, but it will be a community of the students that form that particular cohort of students that are learning remotely together.
Yeah. I appreciate and understand all that, and I understand the puzzle. I think I'm raising that to just raise awareness of one of the unique ways that a group of students that I think that we're trying to center in our design process are going to be affected. And so just being mindful and cognizant of that within any transitions will be helpful. And if, it's good to hear that prioritizing a Rowe teacher for Rowe students as part of that planning. I don't think that was understood from what I've read or from what I've heard from families. So I think there's just a particular level of outreach and communication and care that I'd ask for to those families, at the least. And again, I know everybody is caring with all of themselves. I'm not second guessing that. Okay, so my next topic is community partners. I've spoken with several partners, and I know that there's significant resources coming to them during this time of the pandemic, and particularly in a lot of their grant agreements and the philanthropic giving is to support PPS students. And that ranges from music programming to elementary students who are English language learners to outdoor learning. And my sense is that we're leaving a lot of those resources on the table. And I think that's a matter of sequencing right now. Like, you had to get through certain things before you can get to that level. If we were given the way that, anyway. So I'm curious, is there any plans to coordinate further, understanding that most of those partners want to have the same centering of concerns that we have for our students' health and wellness, physical, emotional, and mental, and they have human resources, and they have skill sets, and they have financial resources, all sorts of things that help us serve our students better. Is there a plan to better coordinate essentially millions of dollars of resources that are sitting around the district right now?
Let me tackle it, and then Grace, please jump in as you see appropriate. I think that you are right that we came to this late in terms of recognizing that we needed to try to ensure that we would be able to provide a experience for families that would extend into the, in a potential hybrid start that would extend into, those days when students were remote. So we, as Grace described when she talked about it, recently convened all of those partners into a conversation, and that, again, great response, and we feel that we're making progress. It's, it is, it's lots of different organizations with different configurations and different requirements. And so managing all of that is, challenging on top of everything else that we are managing. As summer school ended, we've redirected resources to support Grace in that work. And so I think that we now have, some dedicated resources, and talked about adding additional resources with the state money to help us get that conversation up and running. And clearly, today we made an effort to sort of limit expectations around it, because I would rather under promise and over deliver than say we're going to provide universal care for families on those remote days and then not actually be able to do that. We've also shifted to, with the recommendation that we have on the table, which calls for transitioning fairly rapidly to having our elementary students back full time. We've transitioned to trying to build out the before and after care aspect, as opposed to building the remote day piece of that, because we believe that, and we trust that we will be successful in bringing those students back. And then, with a shortened day, it becomes most important for us to be able to add on at the end of the day to make for a full day of support for students. And while at the same time, running at least a pilot that would allow us to have the sort of understanding of how it works if we wind up in a situation where we need to go fully remote, and we can then leverage those relationships to be able to connect students to those partners on an ongoing basis. Grace, did I miss anything there?
No, I just also want to point out that it was just on Friday that the state gave us the direction about what scenario we are in. And so now that it is clearer, I think that there is direction for us to move forward with our partners. We were just waiting for that, that designation.
Okay, great. I'm encouraged, and thanks for giving Grace more resources. That's good for us all. 2 questions left. The first one is just addressing the cluster of comments that have come in to us about concerns about grades 10 to 12 and students not having access to in-person, particularly around specialized courses like science labs. And I didn't hear that further addressed, so I'll put that out there that we should address that. And lastly, and most critically, I think, is what happens if there's a positive case? Are we quarantining and closing a class, a school, a district? I see vague language in terms of the protocols and working with the CDC to do the contact tracing, and to kind of create it seems like we decide then what we do, and we're living in an age of heightened uncertainty, and I understand that, and this is something I would certainly like more certainty about, to use certainly as many times in the sentence as possible.
We would always try to bring it to the lowest possible level in terms of the closure, guided by the medical experts. So, in every situation, it has to be the specifics of that situation, and while that may feel uncertain to some, I feel more certainty from knowing that we will be looking at that situation with, a careful eye to what are the specifics of it than I would with saying we're going to have a blanket. If 2 people get infected, then we close a class. What if it's 1 person, but that person is really, so I would much rather have CDC and our medical staff looking at the specifics of the situation and advising us on what to do and follow their advice than I would having a, hard and fast rule just to have a hard and fast rule that then, didn't make sense in that specific situation, or, was too stringent or was too loose.
Okay. I think I appreciate what you're saying, and yes, having the guidance of medical professionals to guide us through that is a certainty I like. I think what leaves me worried is that if we don't have a protocol in place to ensure that once we know there's that idea of a positive case, what happens in the first 2 hours, what happens in the first 60 minutes, what happens in the first 24 hours while that guidance is unfolding, or that sort of thing, that level of detail would be appreciated. And I would think we would want to know what our emergency preparedness plan is for when there is a positive case in one of our buildings or classes.
Yeah, and we do have those protocols, and we can share those protocols. So it's that would be great in place.
Okay, thank you. Please share those, and thanks for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. We'll go to Mr. Atkinson, and then I'll be the last one to take a turn.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to echo the thanks that board members and everybody have expressed tonight for all the hard work and over the summer work that staff and huge lists of staff put into this. I need to start off by admitting some bias here. I live with a kindergarten teacher and a very nervous kindergarten teacher, and so that's a lot of the feedback that I've been getting directly, not just from teachers by email, but from the one who I live with on a day-to-day basis, who's very concerned, and I think I've internalized some of that, and I am very nervous about opening schools. I think that the plan that I see in front of me looks like a great light at the end of the tunnel, but I just am worried. I guess I'm not feeling like we're at the end of that tunnel based on the data that I'm looking at, and I have to admit also that I'm not an epidemiologist or a medical professional, and I'm just looking at data and reading, articles in the media, and that's what's informing my position. I'm certainly going to continue to track all of the information that I can very closely over the next weeks and months as we get closer and closer to starting school in the fall. So anyway, that's my preamble. I'm wondering in particular about the remote option and what the process is, and what if there's a date for when a binding decision would be made for students. If those details are available right now.
So we have an understanding based on what we sent out a couple weeks ago of people that are interested in pursuing that. And so we are now in the process of following up with those folks to ensure that they are interested in continuing that way. I imagine that we will have other people now that our plan is public that may come forward and say, I was going to go remote, now I think I'm okay, or the other way around. So we will be able to accommodate that. Obviously, the sooner that we can do that, the better. We are a public school. People are going to continue to enroll, after we make a decision, and when they enroll, we will offer them those choices. And, so there will never be like a date that we just say, you're done, and now you have to come to school, or now you have to go remote.
But I am understanding it correctly that decision made by a family, for example, to select the remote option would be binding for the trimester.
Once that's done, we've said that you would be bound to that for the trimester.
So there's not a specific date or a form, as was mentioned earlier. It's a process of follow-up based on that.
That's our plan right now.
A couple of my questions are around response time to the new data, and this was touched on. 2 weeks is a long time when responding to this epidemic. We know that a difference of days and weeks can have a big impact, and I'm thinking more of the wider community than of the schools specifically. I'm wondering if you have a plan superintendent to sort of reevaluate constantly, sort of on a daily basis based on other indicators beyond just the red, green, yellow indications from the CDC. I think I heard a note to that earlier, but I just wanted
No, let me just be clear about that. If we had evidence that there was, an outbreak in a specific school and that we could not localize the closure to a classroom or something, we would not hesitate for 1 second to move into a school closure in that particular situation. We would not wait for a 2-week, in the future thing that may never actually register because it could be localized in one individual school. So we would not hesitate to do that. We will always be looking at, the circumstances on the ground and engaging with CDC to make a determination, like based on the fact that we had, these 3 kids that tested positive and that they were in these particular places. And after they do all the contact tracing, they tell us that we should close. We're not going to say we're going to wait for 2 weeks.
Does that extend to data from outside of the school community? If we see these hockey stick exponential.
If CDC were to contact us and say, close schools immediately, we would close schools immediately.
But we would rely on that, sort of.
I don't know what else I would rely on.
Fair enough. One other question I had was around something I've observed is folks dropping their guard over time as they become more comfortable in schools. And I'm wondering if there's been any consideration for strategies to maintain vigilance and maintain the requirements that are laid out by the CDC for schools in terms of masks and cleaning and all the other distancing, those requirements.
I think, we're coming at this from that public health approach, and the extent that we can balance teaching with helping, remind people of their personal responsibility for it. That is the most effective strategy for being able to keep our guard up. I see that, myself. I don't wash my hands today as much as I did the first week, that we went into remote learning. And so I do think that that's human nature. And I think, continuing to remind ourselves and doing all of the things that public health, the public health best practice tells us that we should do is really all that we can do.
And the last question I had was around sports. I think we saw something around fall sports, starting some training late this month. And I guess I'm particularly interested in contact sports and how that, how that's being considered when, we think about social distancing and football, for example, probably don't coexist very well. So I'm wondering if that's being pushed.
I mean, we're following the Maine Principals Association guidance around that, and superintendents in general are sitting, and we all made the decision to, before NPA came out with the guidance around postponing the in-person camps until the 24th. We had already decided that we were going to do that, so we will continue to be to play on the safe side of that. I have been tracking some of what's happening nationally in lots of high schools that have started their sports seasons already. Lots of cancellations, lots of positive cases that then cause the sports to be postponed. So I think we will continue to watch for that, and I share your concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson.
Ms. Figdor, you had something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just very briefly, I wanted to offer, and I'll go ahead and do so, but to the other board members, my background is in public health. That is the area my degree is in. So I will go ahead and put together some of the materials that have found most useful, and send an email to the board members and to anyone else in the community who's interested. I'd be happy to share it with you as well, to help sift through. There's so much information out there, but there are some just key documents that I think are important to read, like the National Academy's data, the American Academy of Pediatrics. And so anyway, I'll send around some of the information that I think could be helpful as we're considering this proposal, and then moving forward over the next few months and beyond.
Thank you, Ms. Figdor. Appreciate that. Javier, I have a couple of questions. I'd like to preface them, like everyone else, by saying you don't have to answer it, but you've not held back tonight, which I think it speaks a lot of how prepared you are for this. Hopefully, I can throw you off.
I'm sure you can.
First of all, the presentation that you used tonight, has that been uploaded to Board Docs yet?
I have not done it. I don't know if any of our team, did you do it, Aaron?
I haven't done it yet, but I will. I'll upload a clean version of it here some point shortly before we close the meeting.
Appreciate that. There is a document already on the package that's very helpful and has some details that complement the presentation. But I think as we review the video of today's workshop, it'd be helpful to have.
Yeah, we'll definitely post it, but we do have the plan, which was posted over the weekend, and that is a draft. It's and Malia mentioned this in her presentation. It is evolving, and we will, update it and continue to get it into tip-top shape.
Indeed. So my first question is about the delay of the start of school year. Those 2 weeks, the 10 days, and I apologize if you covered this. Will we have to make up those days to complete 176 instructional days?
We will ask for a waiver, so I can't guarantee that we will be granted the waiver, but we've been given indications that if we're requesting the waiver for the purpose of a COVID-related reason, that would be likely to be approved.
Yep. The Wednesdays not being full instruction days, they would count as educational days?
Yes, those are still instructional days. They're not intended to be like a day off. Our teachers work and our students are expected to work as well. That's in many cases a day for people to catch up. It's a day to connect one-on-one with their teachers, for teachers to do intervention supports and things along those lines. Anything else you would add, Malia, to that?
No, I think that's right.
So if possible, either a short memo just explaining what the waiver process looks like with the DOE and what role the school board has to take in that, given that we normally would approve a calendar but with the DOE waiver, that might have been the case. So just to inform us of our role.
Yeah, so I do, that's a great point, and I'll be glad to do a memo, but that is why we're asking for that action now, because that would be the first and biggest consideration from the DOE's perspective was this approved by the Board of Education?
Yeah, and I'm neither disputing or pushing back against the delay, but for me, a delay does not equal a cancellation of 10 days. So I'm seeing it differently, but I understand the way that you're explaining it, and how today's, or rather the board's decision on the 18th. So the follow-up question to that has more to do with the contractual obligations that we have that are based on the number of educational days for some of our staff members, teachers, and other users. So if you can give us an explanation of how the shortened educational days, how we would address that, given that we do have contractual obligations based on them.
Yeah, and so we've talked about this, and Barb, check me if I'm wrong on any of this, please. But we are intending for all of our staff to work their full calendar. So obviously, teachers and ed techs coming back at their regularly scheduled time, and just having the additional time to prepare for when students actually come in because of all of the additional protocols that we have in place. The same is true for our bus drivers and our food service employees, because we also need to work through all of our protocols. Not to mention that we will continue to be feeding students, and, you know, in the case of transportation, practicing the routes, making sure that we have all of our systems ready to go.
Yeah, and I want to just, without taking too much time, add why I'm asking these questions. And that, as I said in my opening remarks, you know, we're constantly asking people to do more with less. And here's a prime example of that, right? The amount of workload that we're asking people to take on a caseload. So I don't want there to be any sense, and we talked about added compensation for substitute teachers, and I don't want there to be a sense within our workforce that the added time, the added workload, that we're not aware that some people will expect to have added compensation for that. And so I want to be able to understand what our role is, how they're being compensated based on the contractual obligations, and the rest of that conversation. And again, this is more of a long-term kind of outlook on, you know, when I look back at, or rather, when I look forward at what the rest of the school year is going to look like, and again, what we're asking staff to do. I just want to make sure that we're cognizant that, again, we're asking them to do way less. And that applies to everyone across the board. So next, we talked about the added positions that we're looking at, either quote-unquote full-time subs, some janitorial. If we can get the board some sort of chart that explains what these positions are, maybe a number of FTEs, and just as much information in a condensed format to help us understand what these positions are. People can't hear you. You go all mass. I think Mr. Berg would want to see my beard. He's been helping me. Sorry. So I was asking about the. I was asking about the chart for any added positions, just so that we have an understanding of that. My sense is, like everyone else has said, that this is going to be such a long-term, the plan is going to evolve so much over the next year, and I want to know how these positions are going to play into our long-term finances. So understanding what they are and the cost of them would be key.
Yeah, and I think it's important because we did not prioritize talking about the finances, but since it's coming up, I think it is important to make sure that everybody understands that the additional resources that we are receiving from the state at this point, not at this point, definitively, those funds are must be expended by December 31st. So, where we're talking about additional positions, we would only be able to guarantee those positions through December 31st on these funds. After that, we would be dipping into our reserves or discontinuing those positions. So that is, entirely something that we need to work through as to whether we have, confidence that we would be able to retain those positions beyond December 31st. Obviously, there is always the possibility that there could be additional federal money coming our way, but I do want it to be very clear to people that, we are if you talk about certainty and uncertainty, those are some of the uncertainties that we're dealing with, is the fact that these resources, as generous as they are, must be expended by December 31st. So things like the windows, those are great because those we will buy and they will be, paid for, and they're fine. But where it comes to staff, we are on very, very thin ice.
Yep. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think all of us
I think all of us are interested in understanding how our finances are going to be impacted by this.
You mentioned, and I appreciate also the extra funding. I don't think we've heard yet what amount we've been designated.
So our projection is $12 million. So far, we've received confirmation for $6 million, and we're hopeful that the other $6 million will materialize.
But
that, obviously, that's second amount, not also. I guess my last.
I apologize. You might want to repeat when the chair asks a question or says something. It's very hard to hear him still, and I'm seeing that.
Can you hear me? You guys still can't hear me?
You're just kind of in and out and hard to hear. And
yeah, that's true.
Facebook was saying that as well. So.
Yeah. So the question was whether the $12 million, if the second half of that, the $6 million in the second half, would extend beyond December 31st, and the answer to that is no, it would not.
My next question is more programs, and I think it'll be really quick answers. The PATH has the pre-K program. I'm assuming that the high school students who are in their child care program are not going to be in the classroom with the pre-K students. Do we have any details around that?
I don't know the details on that. I don't know, Malia, if you do. Did you hear the question?
I think it was a question about whether or not the students in the PATHS program would be interacting with the pre-K students. So, Aaron, I know you have been working with Kevin on clarifying where we're at with how many students have signed up for that program. I don't know that we have a final plan for that, but I do know that's very much on the radar, and we're working to come to a solution, and definitely would not expect it to be typical in terms of how that program would normally run.
Appreciate it. I think that's it. Most of everything else, I just want to acknowledge, I also received a lot of questions about the high school plan, the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. Certainly heard a lot of enthusiasm around the outdoor learning options, and want to also jump on the support that we've heard other board members speak to exploring that to a full extent. While I understand that there are some limitations there, but again, clearly this is something that has a lot of support, and you've acknowledged that, so exploring those options would be great. I think that's all I have right now. It's getting late, so I think it's important that we do move on. We have a couple other board members that spoke and have their hands raised, so I'll ask them to just try to keep things brief so we can get to the public hearing. So I'll go to Mr. Burke first.
Yes, I apologize for needing to come back to me. I missed a question on my list the first time, and it's an important one. I'm curious what the thoughts and plans are to reconcile the significant gap between this recommended plan and what we are hearing from staff and teachers as recently as 5:30 tonight, with so many that are either decidedly uncomfortable with returning to our buildings or unsure about returning to the buildings. I think that needs to be answered before the 18th. Thanks.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a recommendation to the team and the superintendent is for the IELD students, the newcomers, and I think when we see what's going on with the disparities and the impact on the people of color with the COVID-19, I just see that we have a full day. And the education around the screening, that means everything needs to come from the parents. And I just need to recommend, if we can make sure that they have some prior education, I mean, from the multilingual around the screening to make really understand that the screening, the way the screening should happening from home, because some of the family have 3, 4, 5 kids that they have to go to that process. And because of the language barrier. So we're going to 4 days. So I may recommend maybe think about it and we start with 2 days first and then increase as we go just for the safety reasons. So that's a recommendation that we may think about it. That's what I want to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Thank you, Ms. Bondo.
I think we're done with board questions. So let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next part of our agenda.
We have other things on the agenda.
Yes, we do. All right, so we have, and again, so the people are still logged in. We have one more item on our agenda, and then we'll adjourn, and then we'll start the public hearing right after that. I'll go over the public hearing rules before we get that started. Right now, there are 215 people logged in as attendees, and hard to say how many of them will speak until we ask for the hands to be raised. All right, so next on our agenda, we have a new business. Consideration and action to approve the resolution for the districts joining the opioid addiction class action lawsuit. Is there a motion? Ms. Figdor, second by Mr. Atkinson. Superintendent, please speak on the motion.
Give me 1 second, please. Yes. So we were approached to become a party to a class action litigation that's pending against major pharmaceutical companies and other related entities, resulting from damages that have been suffered from the opioid epidemic. The claims are primarily around the added expenses in the area of special education, supplementary education, and other costs associated with children who were born as a result of opioid use during pregnancy and leading to additional needs for the students. Our current law firm, Drummond Woodsum, was contacted by the national law firm that's leading the litigation and invited them to include Maine and New Hampshire clients in their lawsuit. They've approached school districts in Maine that they represent and asked if we would be interested in joining the litigation. And that's what we're bringing as a recommendation today, that we actually move forward with joining the litigation. The participation will be at no cost to us as a school district. The law firm at the national level that's leading this will be fronting all of the legal costs, and those will come out of any potential settlement that or judgment that results from the case. There will be some minimal staff time in filling out forms and trying to document some of our potential losses, and that is the only cost associated with this. And while it's unknown whether there will be a recovery, we would receive a financial payout if there was one, and it would take a number of years to actually show up in our education budget. So that's really the reason that we are recommending this. It feels like the cost is minimal and the potential recovery is significant, and so that's why we're recommending that we join the litigation.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions on the motion? All right, we have Ms. Morioni.
Your Superintendent, can you just explain what you meant by documenting our losses?
Documenting the increases that could potentially be tied to that. What we've been told is there may be some forms that need to be filled out that would probably be filled out by our special education staff, documenting where we think that we've had incurred any kind of costs. If I said losses, I really should have said costs.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to take public comment on the motion. Just a reminder to the members of the public that we're taking comment on the motion about the resolution for the district joining the opioid addiction class action lawsuit. There are several members on the list of attendees that have had their hands raised for some time. So I just want to make sure that when I call on you, that this is the item that you're looking to speak on. When I call on your name, please, or rather when I give you permission to speak on the Zoom thingy, please state your name, address. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. I'm going to put my phone in front of the screen so that you see how much time is left when we get to about 30 seconds. And hopefully that'll help guide you when your time is up. Okay. Having said that, we'll work our way down the list. The first 3 names on the list of attendees to speak are Bobby Shaddux, Amy Holland, and Susan Mirisola. So we'll start with Bobby Shaddux. Oh yeah, I don't have a host. So I can't ask him to speak.
Aaron, can you allow them to speak? Because you're the co-host.
So you can make me host.
Can you make Chair Rodriguez host?
Good evening. Hello, can you hear me?
Bobby, wait just 1 second so I can set up my time.
All right, Bobby, so you'll have 3 minutes to address the board and you can start speaking.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is Bobby Shaddux. I am a 6'7" social studies teacher at King Middle School and a parent of 2 students at Rowe Elementary. Thank you, members of the board and Superintendent Botana, for your tireless commitment to Portland Public Schools' ideals of equity, achievement, enrichment, and safety. I want to begin by stating very clearly, I don't feel safe returning to in-person instruction.
So Bobby, Bobby, once again, I just want to clarify. We are taking public comment right now on the motion that's on the floor, and that's for us to consider to approve a resolution for the district joining the opioid addiction class action lawsuit. We've not yet started the public hearing for the reopening plan.
Sincere apology.
Nope, that's okay. So let's move Bobby back onto the list of attendees, and just kind of note that he was at the top of the list when we get to the public hearing. And we won't make him wait down the line. I still don't have, I still can't offer people to speak, but the next person up is Susan Mirisola. Susan, you'll have to unmute yourself. Susan?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay, so
Okay.
you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, sir, that was an entire mistake. I have been listening to you with regard to the schools opening or not, and somehow I got in line to speak, and that was a mistake. I apologize.
No, that's okay, Susan. That's all right. Let's again, I'm not host, so whoever's managing this, let's move Susan back in. And next, so the next three people, the only three people that are still left to speak. And again, we have a motion on the floor for the district to consider a resolution to join the opioid addiction class action lawsuit. So we're not yet taking comments on the reopening plan. As soon as we get done with this, we'll start with the reopening plan public hearing. So next, we have Dan Mueller.
Nope. Sorry, I was had my hand raised for the next top opening.
Yeah, appreciate it. So just real quick, I appreciate that people are trying to be proactive and get on the top of the list. But just to identify if anybody does want to speak on the motion that's on the floor, if we can lower the hand. Okay. So we have Elizabeth CH, still her hand raised. So we'll allow her to talk. Elizabeth?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Loud and clear. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Elizabeth Capone Enriquez, or Capone Newton. I live on North Street in Portland. I'm joining remotely, like everyone else, but not in Portland right now. I started my day at 3 a.m. and I'm tired, but I'm going to speak on this motion because I think a lot of people might not, if I understand right, it's possible that nobody explained what the opioid epidemic has meant for public school children. And I want to do my best to explain that a little bit because I think it's important and no doubt related in some kind of way to our other conversation about epidemics and pandemics. So I am a proud supporter of the Church of Safe Injection. And that's a group that tries to make sure that people who are actively using drugs have the supplies they need to be safe as they do that, as well as welcoming them into different choices if that's what they want to do. What I know about the opioid epidemic is that private pharmaceutical companies made quite a bit of money as people suffered, especially poor people. And we know that that means especially people of color. Also a lot of white poor people. As we know, Maine has a lot of white poor people too. What that means is that as the government has for a really long time criminalized drug use, it means that a lot of people have criminal convictions for drug use. I do not have a conviction for drug use, so I can't And I don't identify as a drug user or a past drug user, so I can't speak for people who have had to suffer through that experience in terms of how they're treated by the world. But I would like to ask, I know it's usually not a time when we ask questions, but I would like to ask someone on the board or the superintendent or staff to give everyone one piece of education, which is what percentage or number or both of Portland Public School children have an incarcerated parent, because I don't have it memorized, but it's very high, and it affects children and families quite a bit. It causes a lot of trauma, and most of those incarcerations will be related to.
Just want to ask you to wrap it up. Your time's up.
Yep. No, I just make sure people heard me. The last part was that most of that incarceration, the reason the parent would have been incarcerated instead of at home taking care of their child, is probably related to criminalization of drugs. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We don't have anyone else with their hands raised, so we'll bring it back to the board for further discussion. Do we have any board discussion? I don't see anyone. I don't have the data right off the top of my head, but to what Ms. Capone Enriquez was saying, I believe Maine has one of the highest rates of children with a history of incarcerated parents in all of New England states. I remember actually learning that at a board meeting before I was a board member, sitting in the audience when there was a workshop, and that was probably, if I've been around for 4 years, it was over 4 years ago. So it is a really unfortunate reality that we deal with here in Maine, and I would be incredibly comfortable, as Elizabeth said, jumping to the conclusion that drug related arrests have a lot to do with that. So I appreciate that she brought that up, and I'm not doing justice to what she's asking us to explain to the community, but this is certainly a very important issue, and it certainly plays a big role into the work that we do as a public education district. So having said that, we'll bring it to a vote. Right. So all those in favor of joining the opioid addiction class action lawsuit, please indicate by roll call. Superintendent?
Yes. Yes.
Muted. You're muted, Javier.
Yes. I knew it was me.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Figdor?
Yes.
Ms. Moriani?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Ms. Trevaro?
Mr. Navarro had to leave us, actually.
And Chair Rodriguez?
Yes.
Then that's unanimous. Next up, Superintendent, as part of on the agenda, as part of your report, there was an update on the FY budget reductions. Did we skip that?
We skipped it. I overlooked it. Miranda yelled at me via text. I said, I'm sorry, my head's just not in it, because I was so focused on the presentation that we were going to do. I would be happy to go back and do that, or we could move that to the next board meeting, as it's late. And I know there are a number of people that want to speak so it's entirely up to you. And there's a memo in the packet that I would basically be walking through with you, just outlining what we did to arrive at our final budget. So, what's your pleasure?
I would like us to do more than just go over that briefly. So in the interest of time, where I'm at initially is to postpone it. This was a big issue. So if I see knots around the room, okay, let's postpone it to our next meeting. Could we have a motion so we can vote this and do it official?
You don't have to do that. It's just part of my report. There's no action that the board is taking on this. This is an update for the board.
I was anticipating the angry text on my end. So, having said that, that does get us to the end of our meeting. We sure we look at personnel items. All right. So again, after we adjourn the meeting, we'll immediately start the public hearing. So anyone that's on Zoom, just stay put and we'll get to you. So is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? Mr. Balfan, second by Ms. Bondo. All those in favor? Oh, excuse me. Sorry, man. All right. All those in favor, please indicate, and we'll do a hand raise vote. Okay, and that's unanimous. We've adjourned at 10:41 p.m. Still Tuesday, August 4th.